Hello and welcome to Byju's Exam Prep IAS. I welcome you all to the Hindu news analysis for today. Also, there is a very important workshop coming up for you live this weekend on Saturday on the Byju's Exam Prep app. This Saturday, 6 p.m., we will be having a live workshop to discuss the study plan, the appropriate book list, and the current affairs preparation strategy for the UPSC examination specifically for 2023 attempt. If you want to join this workshop, please use the link given in the description of the video and register yourself. This will be exclusively on the Byju's Exam Prep app. If you have not downloaded the app till now, please do download it right away. Now let's begin with the very first article that talks about the question of reservation. Now, as you know, in the past couple of months, the question on reservation has been in the news for various reasons, specifically because the Supreme Court gave its judgment on the matter of EWS 10% reservation that has been given in India since 2019. Now, as you know, there were multiple questions raised on the EWS, that is economically weaker section reservation. The Supreme Court finally said it is as per the Constitution and it shall continue in its present form. Although this verdict has ended the debate about reservation, at least for now, but the reality is there are still many questions about the reservation on the basis of economically weaker section quota. The author here is saying that reservation was never based on the idea of helping those who are economically weaker. It was always based on the idea of doing right the wrongs that have been done for many generations. That is, it is a thing of inheritance, something that has been passed on from generation to generation. That wrong that has been done for many generations, that is to be corrected through reservation. And reservation on the basis of economically weaker section does not really make sense. The author here says that reservation was meant for a collective disadvantage experienced by a certain group because of their past, because they had been deprived of their rights for many centuries. Rights to live with dignity, right to own land, right to have good jobs that have been denied to them for many centuries. Reservation was introduced to correct that. It was never introduced by an idea that whoever is poor will be held by the government. All these inequalities that we want to get rid of are actually inherited in nature. Economic, cultural, social inequalities have all passed on from generations to generations. When the British were here, they did not allow people from the backward classes to actually own land, to have good jobs, and the same continued for generation to generation. This can be seen in terms of financial and economic inequality as well. For example, inequality in India has increased between 1990 and 2020, especially in the early beginning of the 21st century. The Gini index of wealth inequality that measures how unequal is the distribution of wealth in the country has only increased year on year on year. On an average, an upper caste in India has a wealth of about 8 lakh rupees in 2019. The OBCs have almost half of the wealth per person. Dalits have about 2.28 while tribals have about 2.32. Meaning that lump sum, the upper caste person in India would have 4 times the wealth that a Dalit or a tribal would have. Now, this has got to do a lot more with the economic inequalities that have been going on from generation to generation. The wealth gap is historical and it cannot be just said that because now we are giving reservation, everything would become better. This inequality goes back to the British era when they were not even allowed to own land. The reason why upper castes right now are better off, as per the author, as compared to OBCs or as compared to tribals or Dalits, is because their higher generations or their older generations were allowed to accumulate wealth. They were allowed to own land that was passed on from generation to generation. So today you cannot say that because a person who is Dalit has been given reservation and has got a good job, the person should now not get reservation further on, because this is an injustice going on from generation to generation. Also, the policies that are required to correct all that problem have to be based on caste. You cannot say that now that is the thing of the past, government policies should be caste neutral, because that is not how it works. Closing your eyes and assuming that there is no caste based issues in the society is an incorrect approach. We know caste based discrimination is a reality in India, and that can only be corrected if our policies are based on caste. So they have to be caste focused policies to get rid of the historical inequalities. Thus, the gap in terms of wealth that depends on your caste can only go away if the policies are made in such a manner. Now, it is very obvious that when a certain section of the society gets reservation benefits, the other section of the society obviously would not like it. They might understand it for some years, but when it actually goes on after year and years, you would actually see the other side of the argument getting a lot angrier and protesting against it. The same has happened in India as well. We have seen a lot of anti-reservation protest, and as a result of which we have seen demands of other side of the people demanding reservation of their own. We have seen so many agitations for inclusion in the OBC list. We have seen the Jat agitation, we have seen the Maratha agitation, we have also seen the Patidar agitation. This is not a phenomena which is exclusively seen in India. In fact, in the US also, since the US government has been running a policy of affirmative action for black Americans, we have seen how white people have actually protested against it. So much so that when Donald Trump became the president, he in fact took back some of the affirmative action policies of the US government. Even Joe Biden does not seem to reverse what Donald Trump had done. So there is an acceptance of the fact in other nations as well that the other side, which is not getting in reservation benefits, is actually getting angrier. Now, this becomes a responsibility of the government to actually pass on this information well, for the people to understand this, that reservation being given is not on the basis of anyone being closer to the government or anyone being very friendly with the government. It has to do with the historical wrongs that have been done. Now, I'm sure all of you are aware with the idea of affirmative action. It is a well-renowned theory throughout the entire world. Affirmative action simply means that a government must have policies which actually ensure that those sections of the society which has been underrepresented in various sections, they are getting a preferential treatment in terms of jobs, in terms of education, etc. It is mainly in the form of reservation, but it can be in other forms as well. Affirmative action is followed throughout the entire world and not just in India. They are actually focused on bringing more people into leadership, professional and academic roles from those sections of the society which have been underrepresented. They can be on the basis of race, caste, religion, sex, national origin, etc. US government has been following this policy for over 5 decades now. Whenever the US government has to give any contract, whenever they have to give any jobs, they first prefer those people who come from those sections of the society which are underrepresented, mostly the African Americans. Now, I also wanted to give you an example of how reservation is followed not just in India or in US but in other nations as well. So it's not just an India based concept. Saudi Arabia, for example, a few years back started something called a Nitakat law. Under this, they said that our own citizens should get at least 10% jobs reserved for them. Because the worry for Saudi Arabia government was that most of the jobs were now going to people who were coming from outside Saudi Arabia to get those jobs. Malaysia also for a very long time has been running a policy of Bhumi Putra. Now Malaysia, as you know, has a lot of people of Chinese origin and Indian origin as well. So in order to ensure that their jobs are reserved for them, they actually have been running a Bhumi Putra policy where jobs, education institutions give preference to people who are originally the Malay people. So reservation is not just an India specific concept, it is something that is seen around the entire world. The next article that we have here compares the importance of BIMSTEC to that of SAARC. The reason why this article is written is because 8th of December is commemorated as the SAARC Charter Day. Now, this was a day when SAARC actually came up with its charter. However, the problem here is, despite all the expectations, despite all the ideas that SAARC would do, SAARC has not been able to achieve its true potential. There have been a lot of differences within the SAARC nations, mainly between India and Pakistan. And because of the attitude of Pakistan to obstruct every single thing, SAARC has not been able to achieve its true potential. It was expected that in this region of South Asia, SAARC will actually be a light of hope, be a light of development, and we would emulate the model of ASEAN or EU. But that has not happened. South Asia continues to remain extremely poor and one of the least integrated regions in the entire world. You can put the blame on a lot of things, but mainly Pakistan has to take a lot of blame. Now, you can say that why is it that India is dependent on SARC? India can have its bilateral relations one on one with all the neighbors, but the reality is bilateralism or bilateral relations can never be a substitute to regional cooperation. We have seen how successful ASEAN has been, we have seen how successful EU has been, and SARC attempts to do the same. Now, because SARC has not been able to work properly, we have seen how the Indian government in the past few years has been focusing more of its energy on BIMSTEC. Now, BIMSTEC has a group that has many common members with SARC, except Pakistan, except Afghanistan, etc. BIMSTEC came up in 1997 and it first had few members which had been expanded year after year. So now it has 5 South Asian nations: Bangladesh, Bhutan, Nepal, India, and Sri Lanka, and also 2 ASEAN nations, Myanmar and Thailand. Thus, in a way, it can be a very good connected organization between SARC and ASEAN because it has membership from both these parties. Now, the reason why this article is written is a few days back, BIMSTEC finally adopted its charter. More than 25 years after it came into being, finally they have a charter. Now, this charter is slightly better than SARC, but it still has some other issues. For example, charter really means a constitution. So the BIMSTEC charter talks about admission of new members as well. So other members such as Maldives can also be included in BIMSTEC in the coming years. But there are some problems with the BIMSTEC charter as well. The author says the BIMSTEC charter does not contain something like an ASEAN charter does. So ASEAN charter, for example, has a provision called ASEAN minus X formula. Now let's try and understand this. So what happens in these groups is, let's say BIMSTEC is an entire group of these nations. So what is expected is that if there are 7 members in BIMSTEC, all these 7 members will come together and they will negotiate a free trade agreement. Now, when you negotiate a free trade agreement with 7 members or 10 members or 15 members, it becomes very difficult to conclude because 1 or 2 nations will always have a problem. As a result of which, we never have a successful free trade agreement. So what ASEAN did was, ASEAN has a ASEAN minus X formula saying that it is not necessary for all the ASEAN nations to compromise and work together on one free trade agreement. Rather than that, if only let's say 4 members of ASEAN are fine, then the 4 members can come together and make their own formula. Similarly, if only 5 members of ASEAN want to go ahead and make a trade agreement, they can also do that. They don't have to be dependent on all the ASEAN nations coming together. This is called the ASEAN minus X formula. This kind of formula actually allows ASEAN to be a much more successful group in the sense that they don't have to be dependent on all the other members and other members don't hold the veto power. Similar kind of a thing should have been done in BIMSTEC, but it has not been done. This kind of an idea could have allowed India, Bangladesh or India, Thailand, etc. to have their own bilateral trade without waiting for the entire BIMSTEC group to come together and have this agreement. So these are some of the things that can be included in BIMSTEC charter as per the author. These are the member nations of BIMSTEC, just to give you an idea. SARC minus Pakistan, Maldives and Afghanistan will actually see the other country being a part of BIMSTEC. And then BIMSTEC also has Thailand and Myanmar. What BIMSTEC has done is they have actually divided their responsibilities amongst different member nations. So Thailand is given the responsibility of connectivity, so they will come up with ideas of how to make the BIMSTEC region more connected. India will be responsible for security, counter-terrorism, disaster management, energy, etc. Nepal will think about people-to-people contact, culture, tourism, so on and so forth. BIMSTEC in itself is an extremely significant region for India because we have a lot of coastal states here that are in direct connection with the Bay of Bengal. We have Odisha here, we have Andhra Pradesh, we have West Bengal. All of these states here actually form a very important part of the Bay of Bengal initiative for multi-sectoral technical and economic cooperation. The next article that we have here is about requirement of a tourist police. The author here says India for many years has been trying to become a foreign tourist attraction. India is blessed to have a lot of natural and man-made beauty as well, because of which a lot of tourists come to India year after year from foreign nations. But the sad reality is there are also a lot of crimes that happen in India against the foreign tourist. The author here gives multiple examples. For example, a 12-year-old Russian girl was raped in Goa in April this year. There was also a case of a Latvian woman in 2018 who was raped in Kerala. There have been similar cases of an Iraqi couple being robbed of all their money in Gurugram, where two people came in posing as the police. All these issues highlight towards the fact that there is a special need to have tourist police specifically to look into the needs of tourists in India. Because these kind of incidents not just bring a bad name to India, they also make sure that tourists don't then recommend India to their friends and the number of tourists in coming to India actually decline. We have also seen how many countries have actually issued notifications to their tourists: don't visit India if you're traveling alone, if you're a woman. These kind of notifications bring a very bad name to the country. The National Crime Record Bureau says that Delhi recorded 27 cases of crime against foreigners last year, which is seen to be a decline as compared to previous years. We have Rajasthan also having a large number of cases against foreign tourists, but you also have to understand in many cases these cases are not even registered. When there is a tourist in India and something wrong happens to him or her, there is a good chance that they might think we are here only for a few days. Let's not get into all this problem of police and courts. Let's just go back. The same issue is the reason why we have so little of the cases being reported. These crimes against foreigners dent our image globally and also impact our income as well. Because tourists coming from foreign nations are a big source of foreign exchange in India. And tourism, for which Indian government has been taking a lot of steps, including giving fees on arrival, including having revamped many of these tourist places. All these policies of the government of India would not really be helpful if this issue is not tackled head on. Though the concept of tourist police has been suggested by many commissions, only few states in India have a specific tourist police. We have one in UP, we have one in Madhya Pradesh, Goa, Delhi, Rajasthan, and Kerala that have their own tourist police specifically to cater to the needs of the tourists. Now, the reason specifically why this article is written is a few days back there was actually a conference organized by BPRD, that is Bureau of Police Research and Development, highlighting the need to actually have specific tourist police. Now, it is also connected with India becoming the G20 president. Now, because of India's G20 presidency, India will host a lot of meetings of G20 in this year, meaning that a lot of foreign tourists will come into India. Their security, their safety will be the responsibility of the Indian government. For that, we have tried to set up tourist police stations specifically to cater to their needs. This was a conference idea suggested by Bureau of Police Research and Development. They have identified 25 tourist spots across the country where tourist police necessarily need to be deployed to help foreigners. The police personnel have also been offered that if you join the tourist police on your own, you will be given 30% deputation allowance, so a 30% increase in your salary if you join the tourist police, so that it becomes more attractive for them. Now, if you want to join the tourist police, obviously there will be some other requirements as well. You should be well versed with some foreign languages, you should be helpful with the tourists, etc. Only then you would be able to join these. There is one more part of the problem here. Just making tourist police will not really solve the problem. As I said earlier, when something wrong happens with a tourist, many tourists would think, we just have to stay here for a few days, why to go to the police, because the courts and the police will take a lot of time. This also has to be corrected. There would be very few foreigners who would be willing to the court all the way because they would have to go back in a few days. So the courts also have to ensure that these kind of issues are heard in a fast track manner because the foreigners would have to go back. So any issue against a foreigner, any culprit has to be punished speedily in the fast track courts if we have to resolve these issues. All these are a very important part of India's preparation as we take up the G20 presidency. As I told you just a few weeks back, this conference was held where the police suggested that we should have a special tourist police in our country to ensure that foreign tourists don't have a problem when they're touring the country and various parts of India. Now, tourism specifically has a lot of potential for India because, as I said, India is blessed to have a lot of natural attractions and also artificial attraction. Apart from this, also there are many other factors in tourism which the government of India can actually take advantage of. India is a rising destination for medical tourism. A lot of people come in to India specifically for affordable treatment. We have heritage tourism, a lot of people visiting India for a lot of heritage related places such as Buddhism, etc. We have luxury tourism, pilgrimage tourism, adventure tourism. All of these have a potential of bringing in a lot of foreign exchange for the country. In fact, the Prime Minister also has said multiple times in his address to the nation that people within the country also should visit different places in the country to appreciate the natural beauty and to help others earn a good wage. The next article that we have here is on a topic that has been discussed across the entire country multiple times: appointment of the judges, specifically in the higher judiciary. It is in the news because now in this debate, the Vice President has also come up. Vice President of India, Shri Jagdeep Dhankar, recently made a comment that he was very surprised when the Supreme Court struck down the NJAC, that is the National Judicial Appointment Commission, and the Parliament did not say anything about that. As you would know, a few years back, the Parliament of India amended the Constitution to introduce National Judicial Appointment Commission to replace the collegium system for appointing judges in the Supreme Court and the High Court. As expected, the Supreme Court struck it down, saying that it is a violation of the basic structure of the Constitution and we will not allow that. Since then, the collegium system has come back for the appointment of judges in the Supreme Court and the High Court. Now, nothing has happened after those comments made by the Vice President, but this matter again has come in the news. Article 124 of the Indian Constitution, as you know, talks about the appointment of the judges of the Supreme Court, that shall be done by the President of India, on advice of the judges of Supreme Court and High Court as he thinks necessary. The entire question is whether this advice given by the judiciary shall be binding or it shall not be binding. As for the three judges' cases which led to the formation of the collegium system in India, you also know advice given by the collegium that consists of the Chief Justice of India and the four senior most judges of the Supreme Court. That advice is binding on the President when it comes to appointment of the Supreme Court judges. Thus, the government has no role to play in the appointment of Supreme Court or the High Court judges, which the government does not appreciate. The 99th Constitutional Amendment Act, as we know, had introduced three new articles: 124A, 124B and 124C, that created NJAC, a constitutional body having 6 members, 3 from the judiciary, 1 law minister and 2 other members from the civil society, to then advise the President rather than the collegium advising them. The Supreme Court, however, had struck it down, saying that NJAC is a violation of the basic structure of the Constitution. Now, the idea of the NJAC was more specifically an idea from the government to have at least some role in the appointment of the judges in the Supreme Court and in the High Court. The NJAC, as I said, was supposed to have 3 members from the judiciary, that is the Chief Justice of India and 2 senior most judges. Then it would have 1 law minister from the government of India, and then it would have 2 eminent people. Who would these eminent people be? These eminent people would be the ones nominated by a committee having Chief Justice of India, Prime Minister and the leader of opposition of the Lok Sabha. Out of these, 1 person should be scheduled tribe or scheduled caste or OBC or from minority community or a women. Now, in effect, there would be 3 people from the judiciary and 3 people from outside the judiciary. Not just this, when they are recommending the name to the President of India, even if 2 members of the NJAC, any 2, if they oppose a name, that name will not be given to the President of India. In effect, the judiciary could actually veto any name that it wanted because it had 3 people in the NJAC and it needed only 2 people to veto the name. So the government says that we were never taking away the power of the judiciary. This is a wrong perception that judiciary has made. They're saying that our power to appoint the judges was taken away. That is not the case. We are just making sure that there are more people in the NJAC and the power will still remain with the Supreme Court judges only. If you look at other countries also, there are various ways in which the judges are appointed. In US, because they have the presidential form of government, the US president chooses to nominate a Supreme Court judge, but that has to be confirmed by the Senate before the nomination is done. Then in UK, we have a 5-person panel that consists of the Supreme Court President, his deputy, a member appointed by the JAC, that is the Joint Action Committee of England, Scotland, Northern Ireland, etc. Then we also have a system in Germany where the executive and legislature, both of them decide. And in South Africa, the president of South Africa has the power to decide. So there are various ways in which the Supreme Court judges are appointed in different nations, and the government of India believes there is scope for change in India as well. The next article that we have here is an interesting debate about the conjugal rights of the visitors. Now, what are conjugal rights? Conjugal rights are the rights created by marriage. For example, if you have a husband or a wife, then you have the right to spend time with them. You have the right to be with them for some time. These are called conjugal rights. Just because one of the person, a husband or a wife, goes to prison doesn't mean that the other person also has to suffer because of this separation. This is the debate around conjugal rights. Now, why is this in the news? This is because the state of Punjab has actually said recently that conjugal rights for inmates are a part of their right to life and personal liberty. Meaning that even if you are in prison, you still have the right that your spouse can come and visit you and you can actually talk to them, spend some time in there. There are multiple reports that suggest that such visits by their spouse, ensure good conduct of the prisoners within the prison. These conjugal rights, as I said, are the rights created by marriage, where husband and wife have the right to each other's company. However, conjugal visits have not been clearly defined in the law in India. There have been some cases where the jail administration does not allow some visits, while in other cases, people go to the courts especially for these kind of rights. I'll give you multiple examples. In 1979, the Supreme Court said, visit to prisoners by family and friends are solace and isolation, so it is a good thing, and only a dehumanized system can derive this delight by depriving the person of this amenity. Meaning that in 1979, Supreme Court said such visits should be allowed. Now there have been multiple very interesting cases in there. Multiple times it has happened, like let's say a wife is out of the prison, her husband is in the prison for multiple years. So wife has gone to the court saying that I did not do anything wrong, I am not a criminal, but I am suffering. Why? She says that I am suffering because I have the right to have a child. But because my husband is in the prison, how can I have a child? So please allow my husband to come out on parole so that we can consummate and I can actually have a child, and then the husband can go in. Now this is the kind of debate that has actually gone to the court multiple times. Does it make sense to allow the prisoner to go outside on parole just so that his or her spouse actually can get the right that they deserve because they did not do anything wrong? Multiple judgments have been given and multiple states have actually formed their own policies. For example, just this year, Madras High Court observed even though conjugal visits could not be held as a fundamental right, the prisoner would still be eligible to avail leave for conjugal visits if there are extraordinary reasons like infertility treatments. So, different states have made different kind of arguments and different high courts have also heard the matter differently. Now, if you look around the world, most nations recognize these rights. In fact, US, Brazil, Israel even allow same-sex conjugal visits. The idea is progressing because there have been multiple reports that show it brings a positive change in the behavior of the person within the prison. Psychologists, psychiatrists, prison reforms, academics, all of them endorse this idea. Now in India, as I said, there is no specific law for that. In 2015, in the Punjab and Haryana High Court, while hearing a case, court ruled that the sole prerogative of the state to regulate a legally established procedure for the same. So the state will decide that. The judge said that unless reasonably classified, inmates are entitled to right to procreate, meaning that they have the right to give birth to a child and it was a fundamental right. So this can be a good reason to send the person on parole. These were the important articles on the Hindu newspaper today. Now a couple of practice questions. Number 1. Crimes against foreigners are a major impediment towards India's path of becoming a global tourist hub. Comment. Second, compare the method of appointment of judges in the higher judiciary as envisaged by the NJAC with that of the collegium method. Both these questions have to be answered within 250 words each. Thank you so much for watching the video. Have a good day ahead.